This is Pod Populi.
Podcast for the people.
The Great Love Debate. It's the Great Love Debate.
The Great Love Debate. It's the Great Love Debate.
Hi again, everyone. It's Brian Howie. Welcome to The Great Love Debate, the world's #1 dating and relationship podcast since 2015. I briefly touched on something a couple episodes ago, and I wanted to expand on it because some people brought it up to me, and I was thinking about it. One thing that I said many, many moons ago was that somewhere along the line, we stopped looking at the fairy tales to give us our romantic guidance and to sort of shape our dreams of what we were looking for. Somewhere along the line, the daddies went from telling their daughters that they were princesses to telling them that you cannot trust a man and you need to take care of yourself. That happened during my lifetime, that the idea of Prince Charming or a man was going to rescue you or anything kind of went away, and fairy tales sort of lost their mojo in terms of the way both men and women thought. Men still believe they can rescue, but the women now believe that that's a real long shot. And somewhere along the line, we shifted our romantic fantasies from the fairy tales to romantic comedies. And we tend, both men and women, to date that way. I mentioned a couple weeks ago where men really all want to believe that they are Adam Sandler, and that no matter how they look or how they dress or what they do for a living, eventually Julie Bowen or Drew Barrymore or Jennifer Aniston or any of his very carefully chosen co-stars will eventually fall in love with him. And it's an Adam Sandler complex that a lot of men have. On the other hand, the women believe that if they are in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong people, somehow that will eventually work itself out. And there's a lot of different directions that romantic comedies try and go. I have not done an episode devoted to this. I'm going to talk about some of the ones that I like, some of the ones that are not really considered romantic comedies, and some of the lessons that we probably should not be learning from them. I had to bring in a pro to help me with this, though. I'm fairly well-versed, about as well-versed as a guy can be, and we are doing romantic comedy here at the Great Love Debate. This is not a romantic comedy, but we're doing romantic comedy because we try and make you laugh, and we try and make you fall in love here. But I brought in a pro. She is the host of the new but very, very popular, the one with all the 80s, the one about the 90s. I screwed up the name of her podcast. Katie Gross. What's the name of your podcast?
I thought for a second you truly forgot it. I'm like, come on, Brian.
What is it?
It's called The One with All the 90s.
The One with All the 90s. I've been on it. I should know it. It's excellent. She's obsessed with the 90s. If you want to get your Hanson, your Mbop, and your
but it's so
Spice
much
Girls
more
on.
than that. You are so stuck
more
on the Hanson thing, but we'll talk about that later.
You're stuck on the Hanson
No,
thing.
you are. I have a lot of facts for our episode later.
Okay,
it's going to blow your mind.
All right, we'll get into your
Okay.
90s. But the 90s was where this started to shift, where the 80s were a lot of teen comedies. There were a lot of coming-of-age stories when you talk about romantic comedies. The 90s was sort of... It really turned the corner in terms of what we like and what we look for and whatever. How would you define a romantic comedy?
I would define a romantic comedy. Oh, that's a really good question. An excuse to go see a movie with my new date and hope that he's going to put his arm around me. Because I feel like, I don't know, the Avengers and all these Star Wars movies,
Right.
Not so romantic, not really going to get touchy-feely for me in the movie theater. But rom-coms, I feel like we're probably going places later
I remember
after we get home.
walking up to the box office one time and going, 2 for Must Love Dogs, please?
Wow, that's an old one.
I know, because
Yeah.
the girl's like, we're going to see that. And I'm like, oh, God, or whatever.
But how did the rest of your night go after you saw it, though?
Well, that's the point, too. Depending, the romantic comedy can either make her see something in your relationship as a possibility, or I want that, and this guy's never going to give me that fantasy. So it can backfire on you, too. How they cast romantic comedies is another interesting thing. Not to get off on a sidebar. I was going to get into this eventually anyway. The star of the romantic comedy on the female side is rarely the hottest chick in Hollywood. She has to be attractive enough that it's realistic, but not so attractive that the guy on the date will be like, oh my God, I want her. You're never going to see Megan Fox in
Give
a
me an
romantic comedy.
example. Like, who are you thinking?
Drew Barrymore, Meg Ryan, They're cute and pretty and fun, but they're never somebody that your boyfriend is going to have a poster of her on the wall. Okay?
Interesting.
Even Kate Hudson, she's cute and pretty, but she's not regarded as hot. Okay?
You might have just blown my mind. Now I'm like going through all these movies.
Well, there's a concept known as a Blue Lobster. Let me explain this one. I've talked about this on the podcast before.
Go for it.
It's a casting term in Hollywood. And they're always looking for a star who is... so 1 out of every 10,000 lobsters is blue. Did you know that? They're like a genetic freak. Okay? So Blue Lobster in Hollywood is somebody who, depending on either her mood or depending on what she's trying to pull off, can pull off cute, pretty, or hot. Okay?
Okay.
Peak Britney was cute, pretty, and hot. Okay? Most can pull off 2 out of 3. Angelina Jolie, pretty, hot. There's no cute in Angelina Jolie.
You're right.
Jennifer
okay.
Aniston,
Sure.
cute, hot. There's no pretty in Jennifer Aniston.
Oh, well, see, I beg to differ.
Yeah. So somebody
See,
like
I would put her
give me
at
another
pretty, not hot.
Okay, but she's not all 3.
Okay.
You know.
What
Drew
about like
Barrymore.
Jennifer Garner?
Jennifer Garner's not hot.
Oh,
Women like Jennifer Garner because she's not threatening. The boyfriend doesn't want Jennifer Garner. The boyfriend doesn't want Rachel McAdams. They don't.
who are you polling?
Men.
Oh,
Go to any
men,
fraternity
okay.
house and look at
Okay.
the posters on the wall. Okay? It's all 3. It's very rare. So in life, like I know a couple. It's rare to
So
find.
who would be the posters on the wall? Like the girls who just look
like
really
Megan
hot
Fox,
but don't have much
like
to
Blake
say?
Lively.
Okay.
The one who came closest to crossing over was Kate Beckinsale. And,
Okay.
and the movie didn't do well. We never heard from her again in the romantic comedies. Because the girlfriend is not... The girl on a date doesn't want to sit in the movie theater and her boyfriend's like, oh my God, could he get her? Maybe I could get her. She has to be just good looking enough that it's realistic.
And they do this on purpose.
They do this on purpose. She
Okay.
can't be that hot. So I don't know who you think is the hottest chick in Hollywood, but she's not getting the lead in a romantic comedy.
Yeah, personally, I think Margot Robbie is the hottest. But
Yeah,
you're right.
She's
I
not
just
doing...
know
Margot Robbie is smoking hot. She's not doing romantic
But
comedy.
are rom-coms as popular as they were in the 90s?
Well, we'll get into that.
Okay.
So anyway, so that's the way they cast these things. So your definition of a romantic comedy was something that you can go to your boyfriend is. So most romantic comedies come from a point of tension or conflict that results in a relationship. Okay? With some laughter involved. Now, I think we talked about the 2 out of the 3 on the Blue Lobster. I think certain things are disqualified because they are 3 things. Grease, you have to pick 2 out of 3. It's a musical romance. Although it's funny and there's laughs in Grease, I don't think it's a romantic comedy.
I'd agree with you on that.
I don't think La La Land is a romantic comedy.
I
It's
started watching
funny.
that a couple weeks ago. I couldn't even finish it.
You need
got
to
bored.
finish it. I would,
Aye, aye,
if
Catherine.
La La Land was here as a DVD, I would cut it up and I would have it for lunch. That's how much I like La La
okay.
Land. I like it as much as a straight guy could possibly like any movie. There's some funny in it. There's some bittersweet romance in it, and it's musical. So it's not, you can't pick all 3.
Is the musical your favorite part? Do you know all the songs?
No, the story is my favorite. Yes, I do know all the songs too. Yeah, but I know all the songs in Grease too. So,
Well, you kind of have to in Greece.
we kinda
It's a
have-
rite of
You
passage.
should know them in La La
Yes.
Land too.
Oh, okay.
So certain things like Princess Bride, not really a romance. It's funny and it's romantic, but there's no conflict. The conflict is sort of the quest, but they're together the whole time. We know from the jump that they're together, right?
Right. But she was hot. What's her name? Robin. No.
Robin Wright.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not a romantic comedy.
Oh.
She's a princess.
It had Fred Savage.
Something, and then there's movies that feel like romantic comedies, but they're not. Like Devil Wears Prada has the beats of a romantic comedy, but it's basically a workplace comedy.
Speed with Sandra
Bra-
Bullock.
It's
Kind
not
of
a
romantic.
comedy.
It's not a comedy.
It's a drama.
Yeah.
It's a thriller. It's a
But
romantic
there's
thriller.
romance.
Bridesmaids feels
So good.
that's a friendship comedy, even though there's a minor subplot romance. Doesn't really count. Hangover. There's same thing. It's a bromance. You know, old school bromance, even though there's a subplot, or Wedding Singers, that sort of genre.
So it sounds
There's
like
a subplot.
Recently in the last 10 years, it sounds like the movies that have done
Gotten
really
away-
well are maybe the ones that are friendship based
Right.
with a little bit of love on the
Right.
side.
They've sort of run out of ways to spin it, so you end up with the Rebel Wilson spoof of romantic comedies.
Isn't it?
Isn't it romantic?
Yes.
Or you run into sort of Amy Schumer playing the lead in a romantic comedy, which is just sort of that's more of a fantasy, I think, than everything. So that's where you get. So I think I'm gonna start at the top and work backwards. To me, there's one movie that hits all the beats and stand out as the top romantic comedy of all
can't
time
wait.
that I think is the best. Now, the highest grossing romantic comedy of all time. Do you know what that is in terms of just pure box office? Adjusted
Can
for
you give
time.
me a time frame?
I believe it was in the 90s.
In the 90s.
I believe it was.
When Harry Met Sally?
No.
Oh, shoot.
We will talk about Harry Met Sally in
Okay.
about 45 seconds. Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Oh, yes.
Big Fat Greek Wedding is the highest grossing comedy of all time. We didn't really hear much from her again, and we haven't heard that much from him again outside of being Mr. What's his name? Aiden.
Honestly, I don't think I've ever seen it.
He was Aiden, John Corbett.
And why is that? Why haven't we heard anything
From him?
from either of them?
He was on Sex and the City for a while.
Oh.
But her, she wrote it. She produced it. It was her story. It was based on her Greek family. She didn't really have the looks, legs, chops to go into other things. She was very like, I can play myself as a Greek girl, and we can't go into other things. Good point. And she probably got so rich that she got a little lazy.
She doesn't need to work.
Lazy on it,
Smart
too.
girl.
But that was a category of romantic comedy that is fish out of water, wacky family, Crazy Rich Asians falls into that.
My Best Friend's Wedding.
My Best Friend's Wedding falls into that. The Proposal falls into that. Pretty Woman falls into that, where I'm going to take a situation that is so far out of my comfort zone, and the conflict and the stressors are going to cause. So when we tell people you got to look for that to date, well, you want to live in a romantic comedy, you got to look that the answers are outside of your comfort zone. Okay? Nobody was more outside of their comfort zone than Julia Roberts on Rodeo Drive. You know? Or the Crazy Rich Asians.
Did you know they almost
her
named
going-
that movie 3000
Why?
before they came up with Pretty Woman?
I did not. Why?
So this is there's a Netflix show called The Movies That Made Us, and so they do a whole deep dive into this movie. The writer of Pretty Woman named it 3000 because his dad thought that the numbers 3000 always made hit movies. They named two that, of course, I've never heard of, but it kind of sounds like a futuristic space odyssey kind of movie. So it's like the last minute they finally changed it over, and I'm very glad that they did because that's
it's
just
always
weird.
good to have a song title for a movie. Pretty Woman, fish out of water, stress, whole thing. So when people are like, how should I date? I want life to be like a romantic comedy. Well, no, you mostly want life to be like a workplace romantic comedy where you fall in love with the guy across the cubicle or the girl across the cubicle who didn't notice you, and then you end up together. Okay? That's really what you're looking for. You are not normally willing to take the leap where you're going to go on this crazy adventure like what you said before. I believe that the greatest romantic comedy of all time, if you're just going to list them in terms of the beats, how memorable they are, how well written they are, is Harry Met Sally. Okay? You can name 10 scenes in Harry Met Sally that you're like, oh my God, that was perfect. Okay? The beats of Harry Met Sally are amazing. You could see why they should get together. You could see why they should not get together. You're not sure if you're rooting for them to get together the whole time. And then at the end, spoiler alert, it's a 30-year-old movie. Can I say what happens
Go
at the
for
end?
it.
The way it ends, the way another standard romantic comedy trope is the friends who are sort of the Greek chorus and chiming in. They each have their sidekick, you know? You don't like Harry Met Sally as much as this?
I'm sitting here. I'm like, I can't remember it. I cannot remember it. I've seen it. I think I've seen bits and pieces. I was still little when that movie came out.
I know. I'm not sure I saw it in the theater.
I'm sorry I failed you.
Well, you didn't fail me. You probably failed yourself.
It sounds
Are you
like
familiar
okay.
with the
I will make it my homework.
Are you familiar with the line, I'll have what she's having?
Oh,
when
well,
she has
yes,
the
of
orgasm?
course.
Yes, so you say
You
yes,
can't be
of course.
alive and breathing and not know that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, there's probably 10 of those in Harry Met Sally.
Name another one.
Harry Met Sally came at a time, so they start out and they're driving across the country with each other. And that was a sort of a theme of romantic comedies at the time. You go back to like The Sure Thing with, I think it was John Cusack in that back in the day. That was sort of a plot point that a lot of romantic comedies used, is we're going to trap